Caleb thought he was rescuing a stray kitten. But as the weeks passed, it became clear this was no ordinary cat. It was a wild bobcat, and it changed his life forever. The wind pushed through bare branches as Caleb's pickup rolled down a narrow lane lined with weathered oak trees. At 42, he was no stranger to long, quiet drives between the rural farms he serviced and his small animal supply shop in Redfield. The gray clouds above hinted at rain, but Caleb found calm in the stillness of these drives, far from the noise of town. As he passed the old Reynolds farm, something unusual caught his eye. A rusted cage sat on the back of a dented pickup. Inside, a small shape huddled against the cold. Caleb slowed, squinting through the dusk. His chest tightened. It was a kitten, fur mussed by the wind. He pulled over and stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. The farmhouse stood dimly lit in the distance. Walking toward him was Eli Reynolds, a farmer he had known for years. Eli's face was lined with concern. "Evening, Caleb," Eli called, his voice low. "Didn't think I'd see you out here today." Caleb nodded toward the cage. "What's the story with this little one?" Eli rubbed his hands together. "That one's been a headache. Lost 3 hens already. Found it in the coop this morning. Scared stiff but still put up a fight. I can't afford more losses. Was planning to deal with it tonight." Caleb moved closer, breath visible in the cold. The kitten, if it really was one, could not have been more than a few months old. But her face was different, ear tufts, thick fur around the cheeks, and paws far too large for her size. "What if I take her?" Caleb asked quietly. Eli looked surprised. "You sure? That one's got wild in her. Probably feral." Caleb had always had a soft spot for animals in trouble. Years of working with veterinarians and farm owners had shaped that in him. But something about this one stood out. Maybe her strength, or maybe the idea that she was facing death just for following her instincts. "I've handled tough animals before," Caleb said, though he had never kept a cat himself. "She won't cause any more problems." After some back and forth and Caleb agreeing to cover the cost of the lost hens, Eli helped him move the cage into his truck. The animal hissed, growling softly, but did not lash out, a strange calm for something supposedly wild. On the way home, Caleb spoke to her gently. "We'll get you warm first. Everything else can wait." He named her Luna, a name he had once read in a book about animal spirits. It seemed right for a little survivor with fire in her eyes. His home was a simple 2-bedroom place on the edge of Redfield, with a large fenced yard he had never really used. That night he turned the guest room into a safe space: food, water, a litter box, and an old sweater for a bed. When he finally opened the cage, Luna dashed into the farthest corner of the room, her sharp amber eyes locked onto him with caution. "Take your time," Caleb said gently, leaving the door partly open. "You are safe here now." Over the next several days, Caleb stayed patient, working slowly to earn Luna's trust. He noticed right away that her eating preferences were different. She completely ignored the regular cat food but eagerly devoured the raw chicken he gave her. Her movements stood out, too, graceful and strong in a way that did not resemble any house cat he had seen. Gradually, Luna began to accept his quiet presence. Within a week, she would come out to eat while Caleb sat calmly nearby. By the second week, she allowed him to move closer, although she still kept a cautious distance. Caleb was drawn in by her behavior. Each day, her traits became more distinct, and he found himself watching her more closely. The first major shift happened during a stormy night. Caleb was woken by unfamiliar noises coming from the spare room. When he checked, he saw Luna clearly unsettled by the thunder. Without much thought, he sat down on the floor and spoke to her in a low, steady voice. To his surprise, Luna crept toward him. After some hesitation, she pressed her side gently against his leg, looking for comfort. "Well, look at you," Caleb whispered, slowly reaching out to pet her soft fur. "Not so tough after all, are you?" From that moment, everything changed. Luna began following Caleb around the house, showing a level of awareness that sometimes caught him off guard. She started responding to her name and developed a routine of greeting him at the door each evening after work. But alongside these bonding moments, Caleb began to notice some unusual changes. Luna was growing quickly, too quickly. By the end of the 3rd month, she had nearly tripled in size, far beyond the normal growth rate of any kitten Caleb had known. Her features were sharpening, the ear tufts more defined, the facial fur thickening, and her paws much larger than expected. Even her walk had changed. She now moved with a kind of bobbing step that Caleb could not quite explain. The first real concern came during a delivery to Dr. Myra Lang's veterinary clinic. Over several visits, Caleb had mentioned Luna's rapid development, which had caught Dr. Lang's interest. "Do you mind if I stop by sometime to see her?" she asked. "Some of what you are describing sounds very unusual." Caleb agreed, thankful for her insight. The next evening, Dr. Lang came by with her medical bag. Luna, now nearly as big as a full-grown cat despite still being quite young, watched suspiciously from the top of a bookshelf. Dr. Lang examined her carefully. As she checked Luna's features and observed her behavior, her expression became more serious. Finally, she sat back and looked at Caleb with clear concern. "Caleb," she said carefully, "I do not think this is a domestic cat. Based on her size, features, and how she acts, it is very likely that Luna is a young bobcat." The words hit hard. "A bobcat? That cannot be right. I found her at a farm." "That is exactly the kind of place they wander into," Dr. Lang explained. "Bobcats often come near farmland when they are hunting. But the signs are all here: the short tail, black ear tips, that thick fur around the face. Honestly, I am surprised it took this long to notice." Caleb dropped into his armchair, staring at Luna as she casually groomed herself, clearly unfazed by what was being said. "What does this mean? What am I supposed to do?" he asked quietly. Dr. Lang's tone softened. "Keeping a wild animal without the right permits or proper space is not allowed. I am required to let the local wildlife department know." She paused, noticing the concern on his face. "They will likely want to move her to a wildlife sanctuary, somewhere that can meet her needs safely." The next few days passed quickly, filled with stress and long hours of searching for answers. Caleb received an official letter from the Auburn Department of Wildlife Management. It gave him 30 days to either surrender Luna to their care or meet all the necessary legal requirements to keep a wild animal on private property. The list was daunting: secure enclosures with detailed construction standards, strict safety guidelines, regular veterinary checks, and high-cost insurance coverage. One evening, while Caleb sat quietly in his backyard watching Luna move gracefully through the enclosed yard, he came to a decision that would reshape both their lives. The idea of handing Luna over to strangers, no matter how kind, felt unbearable. Their bond had grown too strong. Caleb began looking into rural properties outside the city. He eventually found a 5-acre parcel around 40 minutes from Redfield. The land was mostly wooded, with a small open patch and an old cabin in need of repairs. It was not perfect, but it was within reach, especially if he sold his current home. When Caleb shared his plan, his friends were skeptical. "You are really going to change your whole life for a wild animal?" his sister Hannah asked during one of their weekly calls. "It is not just about Luna," Caleb replied. "It just feels like the right path. Like something I am supposed to do." He started sharing their experience online, posting photos and updates about Luna's development and their daily routines. To his surprise, their story began to connect with people. A local TV station ran a short feature on them as part of a segment on unusual animal rescues. The added attention brought both support and scrutiny. One morning, a surprise visit came from a regional wildlife officer named Ethan Moore. When Caleb saw him step out of the truck, his stomach dropped, expecting bad news. But Officer Moore's response was unexpected. Watching Luna move smoothly through a basic agility course Caleb had set up, he said, "I have seen plenty of people try to raise wild animals, usually for the wrong reasons, attention, social media, that sort of thing. But this is different. You are actually focused on the animal's needs. Officer Moore turned out to be a helpful contact. He guided Caleb through the paperwork and permit process, offering advice on how to improve the enclosures designed to meet legal and ethical standards. Through the growing online network built around Luna's story, Caleb connected with wildlife caretakers and rehabilitation centers. Many offered guidance and encouragement. Moving to the new property was not easy. Caleb had to adjust how he ran his supply business, setting up a workspace at home and rearranging his delivery routes. The cabin required major repairs, and Luna's new habitat needed to meet tough construction and safety codes, which took both money and effort. But the community rallied around them. Supporters organized fundraisers and local volunteers pitched in during build days to help with construction. By the time spring arrived, everything had come together. Luna's new space covered a full quarter-acre, blending in trees, rocks, raised platforms, and multiple dens. The cabin was still simple, but fully functional. Most importantly, every required license and inspection had been completed. Living with Luna had shifted Caleb's focus. He enrolled in courses about wildlife rehabilitation and began working with conservation groups in the area. His land, which he named Clearfield Haven, gradually turned into a modest sanctuary focused on local species. 1 year after finding Luna on that back road, Caleb stood by his window, watching her move through the morning fog that settled over the trees. She had grown into a strong adult bobcat, weighing close to 30 pounds, full of quiet power and grace. Yet their connection was unchanged, based on trust and mutual respect. In that time, the sanctuary had already helped several injured and orphaned animals: an owl with a wing injury, a pair of young raccoons, and even another bobcat kit. Each recovery reminded Caleb of the choice he made that cold October day, and why it had been the right one. Dr. Lang, now the lead veterinarian at the sanctuary, often commented on the changes she had seen, not just in Luna, but in Caleb as well. "You have found what you were meant to do," she told him during one of her regular check-ins. "Most people spend their lives searching for something like that." As word spread, Caleb's story began reaching beyond their town, inspiring others to get involved in wildlife care and conservation. He started organizing educational programs for visitors, focusing on the value of respecting wild animals and sharing the lessons he had learned through his experience with Luna. The guest book at the sanctuary began to fill with handwritten notes from people moved by their journey. One message stayed with Caleb: "Thank you for reminding us that sometimes we need to change our lives to help another being, instead of trying to make them change for us." On quiet evenings, Caleb often sat on the cabin porch, watching Luna move through her enclosure with calm confidence. At times, she would pause and glance his way, her amber eyes still carrying the same quiet intensity as the night he first saw her. In those moments, Caleb would think about how often life's best choices come from simply listening to your heart, even when the outcome is uncertain. Their story came to represent how life can shift in unexpected ways when we choose to help rather than turn away. What started as a simple rescue, helping what he believed was an abandoned kitten, turned into a purpose that reshaped both of their lives. As the sanctuary continued to grow, Caleb often reflected on everything that had brought him there. He realized that major turning points sometimes appear as challenges, and that true care often demands that we grow in directions we never saw coming. People in the area, many of whom had doubted his decision at first, eventually became some of the sanctuary's biggest supporters. Farmers who once saw wild animals as threats began calling Caleb for advice on how to live alongside local predators. Schools started scheduling field trips, where children could learn about nature and conservation through Luna's story. Even Hannah, Caleb's sister, who had once questioned his choice, became one of the most active volunteers. "I have never seen you this happy," she told him as they prepared meals for the animals together. Sometimes, the choices that seem the wildest are actually the right ones. As the years passed and seasons changed, Caleb and Luna's journey continued to inspire people and shift perspectives. What began as a rescue had become something much deeper. A quiet reminder that sometimes, when we try to save an animal, we are also finding something lost within ourselves. At the end of each day, Caleb often thought back to that evening when he spotted a tiny, trembling animal in an old cage. He had believed he was saving a kitten. In truth, he had discovered his own calling. As the sun dipped low and colored the landscape in warm light, Luna's silhouette stood out in the fading sky. Caleb understood then that what once seemed like a mistake had become one of the best choices of his life. His path, from supplying farm products to building a place of healing for wild creatures, was not easy. But it had been right. In giving Luna a future, Caleb had found a deeper understanding of himself and his role in the world. Their story became a reminder that when compassion is paired with patience and commitment, it can create lasting change, not just for one life, but for many. And so, their story continues. A quiet, powerful example of how meaningful the bond between people and wild animals can be, especially when guided by care and willingness to grow, even if things turn out differently than we first imagined.